Good afternoon, good evening, and perhaps good morning to all of you colleagues that are out there. Thank you for joining me. And from what I understand, this is the closing sort of keynote. And so I know I'm between you and the rest of your day. And so I appreciate you giving some time. It is my honor and truly my pleasure to join you today for the Principles of Responsible Management Education Forum, a 2024 forum. I'm Dr. Fanta Av, and I am the CEO and Executive Director of NAFSA, Association of International Educators. We're based in Washington, but we have members, 11,000 members all around the world in over 145 countries and at over 4,000 institutions. Really being here and having this opportunity to speak with you is quite special for me on lots of levels. One, because my passion an area of work is international education, and I can't think of a bigger and a better nexus of work than the work that we do at NAFSA in international education and the work that you all do in the field of particularly management education, whether it's pedagogical, whether it's around research, whether it's around impact, and the work that you do on business schools is incredibly important. And so it is great for me to have an opportunity to be able to speak to you, both because of my interest in international education and my work there, but also I'm the product of business education. I actually did my undergraduate studies in the business school at my alma mater, American University in Washington, D.C. And I've always argued that it was the best investment I made was going and getting a degree from in the business sector, because I've used that degree in everything that I've done since coming out of my program. And so the work that you do is significant on lots of levels, and for me on both a professional and a personal level. My conversation with you this afternoon is really going to focus on four things. First, I will want to talk about and really invite each and every one of us to reflect on the shared learning that has taken place as part of your participation in the PRME, and to really talk more about what is that shared learning and where do we take that with us. The second is really to emphasize the key component of collaboration and diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I would argue that business programs have a real social responsibility to do more in that space of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I'll speak a little bit to some of what I have seen and where I think we have an opportunity to do more. Then, of course, a call to action. It is important to come together. It's important to have a roundtable. It is essential to be able to speak really across sectors, and so that we're not just talking to ourselves. And that's the significant benefit that you're getting by participating in the forum that you're currently participating in, is the fact that it is cross-sectoral, in that it's bringing the academy, it's bringing researchers, it's bringing policymakers, and it's bringing the United Nations and other key stakeholders. You've had the tremendous benefit of cross-sectoral engagement over this period of time. And so the call to action about where do we go from here, I think is important. And then I want to finish with a bit of a reflection of where I see an opportunity for a NAFSA and PRME to collaborate, and how you can be part of that collaborative effort as we move forward, and the importance of partnership. So those are the topics that I will be touching on today in my keynote. I always start my morning with a practice, and it's a daily practice for me, and that is to express gratitude. And so this is no different. I'm going to start my keynote this afternoon here in Washington, D.C., at least for this afternoon. I want to start my keynote with, again, an expression of gratitude. The programming that you've benefited from didn't just happen. It has taken place with the hard work and the vision and the sheer determination of a set of people who have come together to make this happen. And so as we're going through this closing, I would like to take just a few minutes to recognize some of the key stakeholders who have been instrumental to the success of the PRME Global Forum. And I thank them also for the opportunity to be part of this incredible flagship program. And so my heartfelt congratulations and my heartfelt gratitude to several folks. First, the organizers, Cheyenne Maddox, Aggie Chidwell, Hivda Elsmer, and the entire PRME Secretariat team. Job well done in putting together an incredible program. And also this has happened as a result of some keynote speakers, among them Omid Ashari, Sanda Ojamo, Andre Hoffman, who have provided tremendous insights and have really allowed, I think, for the participants to be able to think about it and have a window into what are some of our key commitments in business and management education. And so they have really set, I think, some important benchmark for all of us to think about. And then there's also, thanks to the disciplinary track chairs, the chapter chairs, the sponsors, partners, and all of the participants who you have all given of your generous time and expertise and insight and have allowed for an enriching conversation to take place. So again, once again, an expression of gratitude, because none of this happens without the people and the people coming together to make this work happen. And so with that, I'm going to jump right into some of my key sort of reflections as I think about this forum and the importance of this forum and where we go from here. The theme for this year is accelerating our common agenda. And what this theme denotes to me is that, first of all, there is a shared interest in coming together and with a common vision. And that's really what I think the PRME does, is really the fact that you have the 7 principles to guide the work, becomes sort of the anchor for everyone who's involved in this work. And yet what I'm hearing is that with that common agenda, there's a sense of urgency. And that urgency is the need to accelerate the progress that is being made. There's good progress that's being made, but it is clear that that progress is not moving at the speed that is needed given the global and massive challenges that we face. And global education and business education is central to how we can think about solving for many of the global challenges that we confront. And our institutions are key to helping to solve those problems. And so the need for acceleration is really the urgency that I hear and that I've gotten a good sense of as I think about also the profession that I'm in and the work that we're doing. So with this theme of accelerating a common agenda, it is clear to me that with the work that's happening with PRME, there is a shared learning that has happened here. And the question that I would like to leave each of you with, and for you to hopefully ponder over the period of time after the forum is over, is what was the principal learning? What did you get most out of this segment of the forum that perhaps will, in many ways, keep your cup full over the period of time that you're going to continue to engage in this work, but also allow you to reimagine the work? The ability to reimagine this work in order to have the impact that is desperately needed is paramount. And so among the shared learning, what was 1 or 2 things that you have taken away from the forum that you will be able to take back with you and say, you know what, this is going to activate my imagination in how I think about reimagining the work that I'm doing on my campus? Whether it's around the research angle, whether it's around some pedagogical innovations that are needed, whether it's around centering this work with students that are part of the sort of the problem-solving orientation that is needed. So whatever part of this that you can point out is going to be incredibly important. You know, from what I've gathered, the participants have shared enriched exchanges of knowledge and innovative practices, and that is an important part of it. But it's about how do we transform business education and how do we transform the management of business education in order to prepare the next generation of leaders. And I would argue these have to be leaders who are empathetic. These have to be leaders with more foresight. And these have to be leaders who understand that the implications of decisions they make in one corner has implications that will reverberate in so many others. We often say in the field of international education that the local is global and the global is local. And the students and the decision makers and the leaders that you all are shaping in your respective areas are leaders who are going to carry significant responsibilities for creating better outcomes societal-wise. And with PRME and the 7 principles that you have all agreed to and have been outlined, it is clear to me that how we think about the purpose of the work, not only today, but the purpose of the work tomorrow and beyond, is going to have to take place through the eyes, through the actions, and through the impact of our students that we are responsible for today in terms of the quality of the education that's being provided. And so one key question for you all is, how are you preparing the leaders of tomorrow? And what are the key and core attributes that are absolutely necessary for leadership in this global economy and for leadership coming out of business schools and coming out of business education management? What I loved about the forum, and I think this is very important, is that all too often, when we engage in the learning, we're often doing that with each other and we're talking to ourselves. And what I loved about the forum is the fact that the participants come from so many different sectors. The participants came from the academy, it came from the business sector, it came from the United Nations, it came from public sector. So there's been a range of stakeholders that have come together and to figure out, how do we partner? How do we look at these issues collectively? And how do we, in many ways, do some realignment perhaps that is needed? And how would that realignment strengthen the core and allow us to do better together than apart? And I think that's another important component of the shared learning that I hope you've gained from the time that you've spent with each other and from coming together throughout this forum. And so as I reflect on the shared learning, the other piece that I will also ask you to consider and to think about is, who else may be missing from this? What perspective may be still absent? And how do we close that gap in terms of the absence of that perspective? And this leads me to the second component, which is the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion. I said I got my business education. My business education was over 35 plus years ago. And I have to say, having gone back and having looked at business education today, there's been quite a bit of transformation that's happened, but I would argue there has not been enough when it comes to the area of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Our business programs still do not reflect what I would argue are the consumers of today and the consumers of tomorrow, and the perspective that is needed and the perspective taking. Our business programs still, in many ways, have work to do when it comes to representation and when it comes to bringing in the multiple perspectives that are needed and how that's reflected both in who's teaching in our classrooms, but it's also reflected in the kind of research that we're engaged with, and how are we bringing the direct stakeholders and beneficiaries into our sort of our sphere of influence. And I think that's an area where I would argue that we still have tremendous work to do. And let me also emphasize that diversity is not the same thing as inclusion, and it's definitely not the same thing as equity. And so our work around diversity is not going to be enough without thinking about inclusion and about equity. Who is sitting at the table when we're engaging in the key conversations that are needing to take place? How are we fully engaging them in it? And then how is it showing up? We have work to do in that space. And we cannot make advancement in the 17 SDG goals without talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion. Every single one of the SDG goals, whether it's an alleviation of poverty, whether it's about resilient cities and communities, whichever one we choose to focus on, every single one of those have as a component diversity, equity, and inclusion is absolutely central to that. And so I invite each and every one of us to really ask ourselves this fundamental question of, how are our business programs advancing in significant ways the work that is needed around diversity, equity, and inclusion? Who's at the table? Do we need a different table? Is one of my conversation pieces and one of the questions that I have for all of us within the business education sector. And it's everything from the pedagogical choices that we make to the students that we're bringing into the center of our work in relations to our curriculum and all of that, to also the stakeholders and communities that we're engaging in this work. Who are they? And how is it advancing the work that we believe is absolutely essential? So that's one of the other things I'm inviting each and every one of us to think about and to deeply reflect on as we look at this work. So an invitation and a call to that. A call for action. It is not enough for us to have had the roundtables. It is not enough for us to have had our conversations about best practices. They're vitally important, and the ability to transfer knowledge to each other is absolutely essential in how we think about advancing the 2030 agenda for SDGs. It is no secret that the SDG goals that were put in motion, we're far from meeting them society-wise. We're very far from meeting them, and 2030 will be around the corner, and there's a recognition that we are really not as close to meeting those goals as we need to. I do believe that our universities, and I believe that specifically business education and management programs are the center of helping us move further along in how we can take some concrete actions around fulfilling those SDG goals. So my major plea to each and every one of us, and this is why I think your theme of acceleration is so important, is that good work has happened. The 7 principles have to continue to drive innovations. From what I'm seeing, they're absolutely the right principles. They have to continue to drive systemic change that is needed and that we all know is needed. But there's a call that we should have to all higher education stakeholders. And that is, we have to double down on the work that needs to take place, because it is clear that for the work that is taking place, it is now moving fast enough. And there's a real sense of urgency. We're seeing it in so many ways in terms of the societal challenges that we confront. So key questions are, where are we in cross-disciplinary collaborations? Business education without interdisciplinary is not complete. So the appetite for cross-disciplinary education on our campuses and interdisciplinary education is one of the questions that I have about where are we in terms of that area of work? And then also, who are we partnering with? What are the range of partnerships opportunities that we have? And so I invite each and every one of us to think about the partnership opportunities. And again, are our partnerships inclusive enough? And if not, how do we move the needle in more inclusive types of partnerships? What is it going to take for more inclusive partnerships? That's a call to action, I think, for each and every one of us. And it is clear that we have to continue to bridge the gap between what's happening with industry and what's happening with the academy. Our students are constantly telling us that that's a gap that we need to bridge. And so there's an opportunity there to do more in that space and to be much more intentional about that. Another call to action is, we cannot talk about preparing the next generation of leaders without engaging fully the next generation of leaders. Our students are central to helping us figure out what are the avenues that we need to prioritize, and we need to engage our students in more than just being learners. They're doers and they're problem solvers. And so our ability to place students at the center and how we engage our students is going to be incredibly important as we move forward. And so as I close, let me close with just a few thoughts. Why NAFSA and PRME? And why am I speaking to you all today? I'm speaking to you all today because I'm the product of international education, and I'm the product of a business education. It has served me in ways that nothing else that I've studied has allowed me to do. And so I believe that NAFSA and PRME have a lot of shared interest and a lot of common goals. In PRME, you are looking at how do we advance responsible business management education worldwide? And I cannot think of a more global orientation than business education. When we think about our institutions, where there's a global orientation to education, business schools are the center of that, both in terms of the students that it attracts, the curriculum, and also the work that happens that is global and local as well. Similarly, we at NAFSA, our relationships are with higher education sector. And we believe that in a globalized world, in order to get to a better place, we must focus on how we prepare the next generation of leaders, and that those next generation of leaders have to come in with the skills, the values orientation that are most needed. So there's an invitation and a call for us, NAFSA and PRME, to join forces, and in joining forces, there are multiple ways that we can do that. You're already doing some of that, but I believe that together we can go even further. And those are things like, as we think about how we advance sustainable development goals, it's things about international internship, global service projects, community-based learning that is global in nature, faculty and student exchanges, and also collaborative research that happens across borders. There are lots of ways that we can join forces, including how we set global standards for responsible management and international education. And so as I leave, and I'm mindful of my time here, I would like to leave you with the following things to remember. One is diversity, equity, and inclusion. There is much, much more work to be done, and we will not succeed in advancing SDG goals without taking into account this specific area of work. Two, as we think about our shared learning and partnerships, who are we partnering with and how we're achieving inclusive partnerships? Three, how are we best leveraging students, not simply as learners, but as co-conspirators, co-collaborators in our quest to prepare the next generations of thought leaders and decision makers within the business field and to help solve some of the most intractable challenges that we face and that are listed within the SDG goals. Those are some of my reflections and thoughts as we leave today. And so with that, I'm going to stop and see from Siane or others. I think we're almost at time. Otherwise, I would be happy to take some questions, but I will leave to our planning team to let me know whether or not we have a minute or so.
I think we are at time, but if people have questions, they can feel free to put them in the lobby chat and we'll send them to you via email for follow-up. But thank you so much for closing out our prime time. We really appreciate you, Fanta, and with your inspiring words and calls to action. Thank you so much.
Thank you all. Thank you for the great work and the important work that you do. Thank you.